Mr. E.G. McConnell, and the interviewer is Wayne Clark. Mr. McConnell, tell us when and where you were born.
My parents were living right here in Jamaica, New York, but I was born in Harlem Hospital, so my mom's had to take that trip by trolley car all the way into the city and then go up to Harlem Hospital. September 28th, 1925. We lived here on South Road in Jamaica, New York at the time. Both my parents were from the Caribbean, and Dad worked in Forest Hills as a chauffeur for a very wealthy family. My mom's was at home taking care of my sister and myself. I went to school. I started out in PS 50 Queens in the kindergarten. I still remember some of my kindergarten friends. Well, one in particular, he was an Italian. His father was in the ice business and later the fuel oil business. And it was a very interesting thing to me, the world about me and the different people that I met. Afro-Americans were the minority here in Jamaica at the time. And most of our neighbors were refugees from Europe, and we got along very, very well. Until they saw me doing something wrong, and they'd grab me by one of my ears and lead me all the way back to my family and throw me to my mom's, where I'd really get a burning. And we got to know one another, and there was so much kindness between neighbors during the Depression years. I'll never forget many a day we had a number of people who'd ring our bell and ask my mom's or dad, is there anything they could do? They just wanted something to eat. And how, you know, we were very sympathetic, my family was, and so was I, to see these people having to ring a doorbell and beg for food and whatnot. Well, we saw hard times. We were one of the fortunate few in the neighborhood whose father had a job. Well, anyway.
Let me ask you, what type of work did your father do?
He was a chauffeur for Harold B. Warner. He was an executive in a life insurance company. And he used to ride the same trolley car that we went to city with when Moms took me to hospital, to Forest Hills, and drove her back. And then years later, as things got better, he was able to buy a car. And we were one of very few in the neighborhood, the whole neighborhood, who had an automobile. So,
any brothers and sisters?
I had one sister. She's older than me. She was inflicted with polio, and riding this trolley car was quite a thing for all of us, because Moms used to take her into an orthopedic hospital in Manhattan, and that was several times a month. So we got to know public transportation and getting around and all like that. Finally, the war erupted in Europe, and this was a great concern to everyone. I was a Boy Scout in Troop 61 right here in Jamaica, New York. We didn't have any all-black Boy Scout troops, so I went to a church up on Jamaica Avenue, and I joined Troop 61, which was entirely white. But I somehow remember the good things that happened in my life, and that was one of them.
Do you remember any kind of like scrap drives or anything with Boy Scouts?
Any what?
Like scrap drives for the war effort at all?
Well, no, America wasn't in the war yet. See, it was a European war. England was in it, and France and Italy was on the German side and whatnot. And anyway, this thing was a very frightening thing. The news reports that we got back from overseas, and there were reports of German submarines being off of the coast of the U.S. This is before we were even involved. And I was a busy little bee in the Boy Scouts. I learned the Morse code, and I learned the semaphore code for signaling and whatnot. I knew map reading and all these different things. And fear was in so many of us until finally, I'll never forget the day, December 7th of 1941, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. And we never had anyone walking through a neighborhood selling papers, but this paperman, extra, read all about it. Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and there was so much fear in us. And America was in this thing. I'll never forget the feeling in the neighborhood from all the neighbors, the concern. So many of them hadn't even received their American citizenship at the time. My mother and father, they got theirs, they had their papers shortly after they got married. Well, now an effort went out because America had never been busy preparing for anything, not looking for any kind of war or anything like this, but the New York World's Fair was going on, and from 1939 and 1940, and as each European country succumbed to this Nazi attack, the buildings closed and they were draped in black mourning for this terrible event. I'll never forget the World's Fair back then. The Italians had a building which stood, I'd say about 150 feet tall. Anyway, they closed their building, and there were some incidents there. There was a shooting or something, a death there and all like that, because people were very upset with Italy and whatnot, so they withdrew from the fair itself. But the French building was draped in this black mourning things in the different countries that succumbed to it. Well, I really felt concerned. December 8th, President Roosevelt declared that a state of war existed. And were we fearful? We were so fearful. But I was only 16 at the time, and I was so concerned about this. I felt I had to be a part of it, see. And I tried to get some of my buddies, you know, who were in the Scouts with me. This one fella, Jimmy Terlizzi, we were the best buddies, see, and I tried to talk to him. He had no father, it was just his mother, so he couldn't get off and go with me. Well, I went down to Whitehall Street, that was the induction center, and I got a application from him, see. And this application, your parents had to sign and all like that. Well, I lied about my age, and so that I wouldn't have any trouble remembering just what it was. I took my sister's birth date and day of birth and all like that, and that's what I put on my application. Anyway, I couldn't get my mom's to sign this. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get her to sign it. My father had taken sick and was in Queens General Hospital here. It's about a couple miles away from here. And he was hospitalized there, I don't know how long. but I decided to work on my dad, see. Finally, I got an idea. Dad was in a ward, nothing but other men in the ward and all like that. So this day, I went up to see my dad, and I had my application form, which had to be signed by one of your parents. Well, prior to this one particular day, I used to go up and see him every day, and I'd show him how well I could march. We had marches in the Boy Scouts, and I knew how to march, and I paraded back and forth in front of him, and sometimes he pretended I was asleep, but right there in the hospital, I was going back and forth, hop, hop, hip, haw, to right, march, so on and so forth. So Dad tried to pretend to be asleep at times, you know, but his roommates, his buddies, they say, hey, McConnell, come on, your son is here, come too, you know. Well, anyway, he had refused and refused time after time to sign this consent slip. But I knew what I was doing. See, actually, I was a businessman from about 11 years old. I did all the neighborhood chores and whatnot around. Everyone had a furnace in their basement, and everybody burned coal. We didn't have oil burners then, see. So anyway, my weekend job was to go around to all these people and sweep up the coal dust from where it was and clean out the furnace, and I did windows for the people and all like that, see, and I kept busy. I had money coming in. My mom's opened a bank account for me, and I was doing very good. Well, anyway, I got an idea how I was going to get my dad to sign this for me. So I went up to his hospital this day, and from the time I got off that elevator, he could hear me hop-hoeing come down the aisle. Well, when I got into a room, they woke Dad up. He tried to pretend that they woke him up, see, and he was quite annoyed with me. I had my application here in my pocket, and I bought a pack of Chesterfield cigarettes because all these guys were smokers, and they couldn't get smokes in the hospital. So he looked at me and said, why do you keep bothering me? He says, I'm sick, I'm here in the hospital, why do you keep bothering? I said, Dad, no, I don't want to bother you. And then I reached in my pocket and deliberately pulled the cigarettes up so he could see, and then I stuffed it back down. He said, what's that you have there? I said, well, Dad, you know, you'll get rid of me if you just sign this thing. See, so he and all his hospital buddies were right on the case. Let's get these cigarettes. See, so he signed the thing for me. I gave him the cigarettes. I said, Dad, I gave him a hug. I says, I'll be seeing you. I'm going in the Army. And boy, I was sharp though. So I still laugh about it today. It's a lot of fun memories.
And you were 16 years old.
I was 16, see.
Now you had to drop out of high school at that point?
I dropped out. I had dropped out, and I had gone up to New Haven, Connecticut with my dad because he had been working in Winchester Arms, see. So I went to school up there, see. And I worked part-time in an auto repair shop for a Frenchman, Mr. Benoit, and he had two sons about my age, and we got along fine, see. Well, anyway, it was when he came back here to New York to see Moms. He took sick, and that's when he went into hospital, see. Well, anyway, I had this sign application, and my cousin, I followed him because he told me that he was underage also, and he told me if you get your people to sign it, you'll get in, see. So he went in 1 week before me. Now I knew I could make it, so I went down to Whitehall Street, raised my right hand, and swore away my life and all like that. And they says, well, okay, you're going to get a 2-week vacation. I said, no, I don't need a vacation. I'm ready to go now. He said, well, no, you got to have his furlough before you go. See, so he gave me 2 weeks. And lo and behold, 2 weeks later, I was to meet them at Penn Station to catch a train out to Camp Upton, New York. See? Well, moms couldn't see me going off like that, you know, and I didn't want moms to go with me. Back then, you know, we didn't have the clothing and all the different attire that we do now. I had one suit, and anytime you bought a suit, usually you got two pair of pants with it. Anyway, I had to fight with my mom's because she liked those knickerbocker breeches, and I wanted long pants like men wore, see? So anyway, since I was paying for it, she compromised and says, okay, we'll get one pair of long pants and a pair of knickerbocker breeches. She had me wearing short pants till, oh my God, till I was in the Boy Scouts and all like getting them knickerbocker breeches. Well, anyway, she packed my bag for me. And in the bag, she had knickerbocker breeches and all these little childish things and all like that, and I'm going away in this man's army. Well, I went there and met the sergeant there and showed him my credentials, and he told me to get in line up with the rest of the guys who were staying up there waiting because we were going to take this Long Island Railroad train out to Riverhead to Camp Upton. And while we're in the line, my mother walked up to the sergeant and started telling him, listen, I want you to take care of my boy. I was never so embarrassed in all my life. See? I said, Mom's go. I'd take my sister's eyebrow pencil and I painted a little fuzz over here, you know. So I was getting along with the guys. I always got along with older people and all like that because I didn't think as a child, as a 16-year-old, I was always a businessman coming up. I went out to Camp Upton, and as we got off at the train and lined up, we were told, all you colored down this way and all you white fellas down this way. I was startled. I'd never heard of this stupidity. Segregation began right here in New York, Camp Upton, New York. Well, what they were doing at the time, the Afro-American troops had the job of doing the KP at all the mess halls there in Upton. White troops were there, but they had these Afro-Americans to come into their place to do the KP and whatnot. Well, this thing disturbed me. This has disturbed the hell out of me. And I started speaking to others and started to disturb them. Joe Louis, world champ, was stationed out there at Camp Upton at the time. Well, we decided, and this was a famous black airman, God, I can't think of his name. He flew for Ethiopia.
Colonel Julian.
Fauntleroy Julian. Yes, thank you. I just couldn't place it. Anyway, he was very much interested in this deal where the blacks had to do the KP. Well, he brought media attention to it, Amsterdam News and whatnot, and they started to look at this thing. All of a sudden, they stopped this business. Blacks did not have to go over to that areas to do it. So we brought a halt to that. I had requested to get into the Tank Corps, and as a volunteer, I was entitled to make my selection of service. Anyway, we had to go to Fort Knox, Kentucky, but there was a waiting list, see? So there was no room there, and this group of guys who were just coming in and volunteering and requesting this had to wait for the training was something like 90 days before we'd ever get down there. So finally, a lot of other guys were shipped out to different places, quartermaster, engineers, and all like that. Finally, we did get the call, and we boarded trains for Fort Knox, Kentucky. The blacks rode in the forward 2 cars of the train. The remainder of the train was occupied by white troops. As this train climbed through the hills of Kentucky, slowly going up more like that, orders came down for us to pull the shades down in our cars in the black part of the train, occupied by blacks. Anyway, the conductor pulled the shades down, and I, being a curious person the way I was, I wanted to know why. How come the next car they didn't pull the shade down where the whites were and none other cars up here? Well, I went between the 2 cars to look out and see. And as I climbed between the 2 cars, this conductor came up to me and told me, no, you can't ride here. I said, well, I'm interested in seeing why we have to pull the shades down. So then he grabbed one of the porters and says, tell him why. So the porter was a black man, and he told me that we had to pull the shades down for our own safety because there had been incidents in the past where some of these hillbillies had fired guns at the cars with the black. Can you imagine how this was registering with me? And I'd never encountered anything like this in my life. Well, we trained in the segregated group. The training was very rigorous and all like that. And anyway, we completed our basic training, and at the end of basic training, the unit shipped out to Camp Claiborne, Louisiana, but I was assigned to go to school. And I went to school in the Armored Force School and studied mechanics and whatnot. And I was quite interested in that because this is what gave me a good start in my life, see. I went to school 4 different times while I was in service, see, and studied gyro stabilizer, wheel vehicle, motorcycle maintenance, tank maintenance, and did I say 4? I think I said 4. But now I was ready for it, and they shipped me down to Camp Claiborne to join my other buddies. See. Now, the first paycheck I got in the Army was $21 for the month. That's what they paid the PVTs. And they had just raised it to $48. And before that payday came along, they raised it to $50. So now this was $50 a month, see. I filled out an application for an allotment to my mother, where I contributed, 1/3 of my pay, and the government put 2/3 along with it to send to my mother and sister. My dad and my mom said broke up at the time. So anyway, this was my thing. I finally opened up a laundry business down there in Camp Claiborne, and I had 3 other guys to work for me. I was the Chinaman with the iron who pressed up these uniforms, and we used to. These guys would go in the shower on a scrub board with a big scrub brush and brown soap and scrub up the uniforms, hang them out to dry, and then gave them to me, and I press them up and put them on a hanger, see. So I got a very good business. It was 3 months I was up there in basic training, you know, and I even did it there in basic training, and I was able to send money home and get myself going and all like that. Well, anyway, the thing was, this war was going along. We saw the invasion of Africa, saw the invasion of Italy, and finally the invasion of France. And rumor had it that we would never go overseas. We shipped out to Camp Hood, Texas. It's now Fort Hood. Anyway, this was a base for tank destroyers. So every day we were out there training these tank destroyers. Every day we rolled out. We were in training over 2 years. And this training as tank destroyers, we learned many a trick. Finally, I was in the guardhouse here because I went on furlough, and I stayed 3 extra days. I wanted to see my dad, who was coming in from a shipyard on the West Coast, and I wanted to see him because I knew sometime soon we'd probably go overseas. So myself and 2 other buddies stayed. We were court-martialed and given 6 months each in the guardhouse. Well, seems though we were in the guardhouse about a week when our unit was called, alerted for overseas duty, and we're in this stinking guardhouse. It was segregated in the guardhouse also. Finally, our company commander came over and took us out of our guardhouse to go overseas. I had so much knowledge. There's only one other guy in the unit who had knowledge about the gyro stabilizer especially, see. So that was to stabilize the gun while the tank was in motion. So they needed me, see. So they took us, the 2 fellas out and put us in our unit, and then we came up to Camp Shank, New York, see. And we were still under company arrest, weren't allowed to come home, and hadn't seen my people in quite, well, not until just before the furlough. We got up here to New York. Doggone it, this brain of mine is the one that hasn't gotten me into more trouble. They wouldn't give us a pass. I took a walk all around the fenced-in area of the camps, and finally I came up with something. I found a drain pipe from the camp that went right on outside our camp. It was a couple 100 feet in length. I crawled through there and found myself outside their camp. My same 2 buddies who had gotten in the guardhouse before, damn if they didn't follow me through that drain pipe. We strapped on our work clothes and wrapped it up with our raincoat and strapped it on our back and crawled on out. We got out, changed our clothes to our outside clothes, and then hitchhiked 17 miles into the city. I got in the city about every night while we were there at Camp Shank. Most of the guys only got home twice, but every night I got home with my buddies. The last night, the unit was alerted that we were going to board ship. All right, come on guys, let's go. Columbus took a chance, and we went home. When we got back to camp that morning, everyone was lined up on the streets. And our bed, they had stuck our duffel bag in the bed at night and covered it over, so people thought we were still there. Well, anyway, when we got back, somebody told us where our duffel bags were. They rolled up our bed as though we were there. Well, rolled up our bed and we sneaked in ranks and got back there. So, am I going too long?
No.
Yeah, well, anyway, we boarded the Espion Bay, a British freighter here in New York Harbor. We were in the front of the ship. We were in the forward part in the front of the ship. And as the ship left New York Harbor and joined a convoy someplace out there, all we saw was ships. As far as you could see, any direction, nothing but ships. We were 21 days on the Atlantic Ocean and finally pulled into Bristol, England, where we mounted up on a train and went across to this little town in southern England. We're still under company arrest. We couldn't get a pass to town or nothing. Well, that's just one of our events, and all young guys, we were always so hungry, never got enough food. Well, anyway, as a Boy Scout, I know how to cook and all like that. We helped ourselves to some hams and stuff like that that we got off of a ship, the ship we were on. And we had these, they were salted hams and all like that. And then we had to have vegetables to go along with it. It was a farm right next door to where we lived. And they had all these greens, and they had corn and all like that. So myself and a couple of my buddies decided, I told them, let's go on over there and get some of that corn and some of the greens, see? So we went over there every day and got the corn and green. This one day, we went over there and we were crawling on our bellies amongst the greens. All of a sudden, said, "Hiya, Yank." I said, "Oh my God." It was this farmer, and he was there with his two sons. And, you know, I always had some bull about me, so I stood up. He says, "What are you doing down there?" I said, "Well, I have to be honest with you. We came over here to steal some of your greens and your corn because we were hungry." And he and the two boys started laughing like hell. To steal what? The corn and the greens? Yes, sir. He said, "I only raise them for the hogs. We British don't eat corn and stuff like this." And he laughed. Then the kids came to us, and we gave them chewing gum and candy and all like that. He says, "Anytime you want it, feel free, come on over and get it." Well, I went back, and I told the guys about it, and the guys in the other company and all that. "Can we go to?" I said, No, I can bring you some. We don't want everyone going over here and ruin a good thing, see? Well, we stayed in England till we were issued our equipment, and now we were off. This was in late October. We boarded these LSTs, landing ship tanks. Our tanks are loaded on, all like that. And we sailed for, I can't think of the name, you know where they invaded. Normandy, yeah. And as we were sailing along, I was up on deck watching, and the ship was just going along, and all of a sudden I felt it scrape the bottom. And we were still a few hundred feet out away from the ocean. That's what these LSTs did. They'd ground themselves. They'd wait until the time receded in, landing. The thing was already secured. During the invasion, the tanks just rolled off into deep water. But see, we just stayed there for a few hours till the water receded way back behind the ship. Then we came off and went up on land. I was so amazed to see the amount of destroyed American equipment, ships, tanks, trucks, and all like that still littering the beach. And as we rolled up on shore, in a bit, we came across the town of St. Lo, which was devastated. I've never seen such a devastated place in my life. And there were many hedgerows and whatnot. Well, we had a convoy across France up to Nancy. That's where the fighting was. Whereupon General George S. Patton came down to greet this all-black tank unit. In my book, I showed you one of the headlines, and he addressed us. And he said, "I sent for you because I heard you were good, and I have nothing but the best in my army. I want you to go up and shoot those blank blank." He's a very profane man. Kraut so-and-sos. And after he addressed us like that, he decided to come take a look because this Sherman tank had one of the new type guns, a 76 millimeter gun. The man stepped down from the half-track where he was talking and walked directly over. And I saw him come towards us. We were told to mount up. Mounted up in our tanks. I got into the cannoneer side. He hopped up on that tank like he was a 16-year-old, dapper, sharp as hell, climbed down into the commander's side. With his funny eyes, something like mine, gray or green or whatever, he looked me right in the eye and said, "Listen, boy, when you go up there, I want you to shoot up every blank, blank, blank thing you see. Do you understand me, boy?" Well, I was so annoyed with segregation and all like that. And in the South, he was supposed to say yes, sir, to any white males, that I couldn't say yes, sir. "I want you to shoot up every so-and-so thing you see. Do you understand me, boy?" I said, "Yes, General." I always answered with their rank. See, not yes, sir. Our unit went into combat. We fought for 183 consecutive days through 6 European countries. We fought with 3 different armies. We fought with, I'd say, at least 8 different divisions. Never once did we withdraw for a rest. Never once did our American Red Cross coffee donut truck come to visit us. When I think about the horrors of war and all like that, we had no trouble fighting along with the different divisions. One general, the general of 17th Airborne Division, it was said, it's written in several books, that he stated at one time he'd rather have 5 tanks from the 761st Black Panther tank battalion than any greater amount from any other unit. Boy, were we flattered. Was this something? We were recommended way back then for different awards. One of my combat buddies, Reuben Rivers, who was killed in battle November 19th, 1944, he was recommended for the Congressional Medal of Honor. He didn't get it, but his family got it. January 13th, 1997, some 50 years after the war. We finally got the Presidential Unit Citation from Jimmy Carter, 33 years after war, haven't been recommended for it. These are some of the better things in my life. I often say this, and I can say it with a smile on my face. My country, 'tis of thee, oh sweet, sweet land of bigotry. That's my story. Do you need any more?
Yeah, I just have a few questions. I'm going to stop the tape here. Okay, this is tape 2 with Mr. E.G. McConnell. Mr. McConnell, let me ask you, do you remember the day Germany surrendered?
Oh, yes I do.
What was that like?
Well, we knew it was right there at hand. Most of the fighting was reduced to accepting the prisoners. The Germans walking towards the American lines. Most Germans fled to the lines rather than wait for the Russians to come through. We finally arrived. Our stopping point was on the Inn River in Steyr, Austria, where we would have met the first Ukrainian army. And boy, these Germans were coming down like crazy. Most of the time, we didn't even have time. We didn't even bother to disarm them. Some of them had hand grenades, a pistol on them, and all like that. And they were just coming towards us, waving at us very friendly. They were so glad that the Americans were taking them in. And I'd like to say one thing. I was injured in battle in Honskirch, France. I was hit in the head and arm, shrapnel. I was hospitalized. There was no problem with the medics on the front picking us up and all like that. I was sent back to hospital in England. While I was in hospital in Ballydu and the other hospital, never once did I get my back rubbed. You know, they came to rub your back. They rubbed everyone's back, you know. You got so sore laying in the bed and all like that. It wasn't until I got back to England and they had these German prisoners working as orderly boys. That's when I finally got some attention and felt I was part of the American force, and something that I almost missed. In the same hospital in Ballydu, France, a 2-star American general came through the ward. And as he passed down the ward, he spoke to just about every soldier. I had a buddy from the 26th Infantry, a white fella. We were the best of buddies. He was a young guy too when he went in. He was the same age as me. And we stuck together like nobody's business. He got shot up the same day. And he saw that I was evacuated along with him. And he held on to my helmet, which had a big gap and hole through it where shrapnel had lodged. And I think it was my good fortune that I used to stuff all my mail from home in the helmet liner. And I truly believed that this helped slow this thing up so it didn't go any farther. In the 100th General Hospital in Ballydu, France, as this man came down the ward, he spoke to all the guys. I was only black on the ward. Went down the end and came back on my side, from my right to my left. When he got to me, to the foot of my bed, he stopped, picked up my chart, which was hanging at the foot of the bed, looked at it, looked over at me, had my head wrapped up, my arm wrapped up and all like that. Put it down, looked me straight in the eye and says, "What's wrong with you, boy? Got the claps?" My buddy, white fella, in the bed next to me, much more severely injured. He wasn't hit in the head though, see. He was in a cast all the way down his legs with a bar across. He couldn't move, or he had nothing to move, everything, arms and all like that. He looked up at General. If he got it from your mother. Learned to talk dirty like this, hanging around with us guys. My goodness.
Once, let me ask you, once the war with Germany ended, how much longer were you in Europe before you were sent home?
Well, we were occupying in Austria and Germany, and people were sent home according to the amount of points that they had. And the points were from different battles, different campaigns. We were in 4 major campaigns in Europe. And we saw so many people going home. We were separated from the divisions that we fought with and all. We had 90-some points average for our unit when we came home. We came home aboard ship. White outfits that had some 40 points.
So you basically, your points were ignored?
Ignored.
And once you got home,
from Fort Dix, New Jersey. Yeah, December 21st, 1945.
And what did you do once you were finished with the Army?
Well, I got a job driving a streetcar in Brooklyn. Let's see. That's 45. Yeah, I hadn't even hit my 21st birthday. I don't think I had. See? And I got this job driving a trolley car out in Brooklyn. And I was having a problem with this thing because I still had shrapnel in my arm, see? And we have a dead man control on electric vehicles such as trains and trolley cars, which you have to depress with about 40 pounds. If not, it'll automatically go into emergency, slamming on brakes and opening doors and all. So I had to put my elbow on it to keep this thing down. So finally, we worked 6 days a week at the time. So finally, I had to take a day off and go to VA. So I told them the problem I was having. And the Veterans Administration here in New York, that was, I think, 257th Avenue at the time. I was told they had no record of my injury. And they'd have to get sworn statements from some of my combat buddies. And I couldn't believe this. So with that, I went to DAV and told them about it. My discharge shows where I was in 4 major campaigns in the European theater, where I'd received Purple Heart, all this sort of stuff, you know. So finally, after sworn statements, they did take me into Holland Hospital in Staten Island and operate. But several of my combat buddies, one in particular, very good buddy of mine from Brooklyn, he was shot up bad. He had something like 8 gunshot wounds in him. He was immediately evacuated back to the States before me. I went to see him after I got out, and the boy had withered away to about the size of a broomstick. And I asked his mother, they lived in a cold water flat in Brownsville, how come he's not in the hospital? She says, I can't get him in the hospital. So this annoyed me so much, I called a couple of my other buddies, and we took him down to the hospital and got him in the hospital. But he didn't even live a year after we were out. And so many guys in the South, as I look back at it, their parents wouldn't send for their bodies overseas. The government provided free transit for their bodies to be shipped back state because they couldn't be buried in their hometown cemeteries, because they didn't allow blacks to be buried in the same cemetery as whites. Man. See why I say that my country 'tis of thee, O sweet land of bigotry?
It must be really tough not to be bitter after, you know, going through experiences like that.
Yeah, but I can't be. Oh, what am I supposed to be? Bitter against you? Huh? No, sir. I was brought up as a scout. Thank God my old scout master, Paul Seabold, used to come over to my home, usually in the middle of the week, not on a meeting night. He was a mailman, worked early in the morning, damn near all night long. He saw me and what direction I could have gotten myself in trouble. I was a little wise guy. I used to do a lot of stuff. He came out and took me down to Baisley Park along with my buddies and studying trees and trail making and all like that. I stole his car. He had a 1935 Ford. And my buddies jumped in and I drove it all the way around the lake and came back. When I came back, he didn't yell at me. He was just so concerned that we had gotten back alive. Man, I never did anything like that to Paul again. He was one of the nicest guys I'll ever know.
Now, you said you worked as a
years and years later, I went back and got my high school diploma. And then I took some courses in public speaking, and I took several courses at college, you know, something to help me because, you know, no one knew the story about us, and I decided I'm going to have to tell people. I've had hundreds of lectures throughout the city, throughout the country. I've even lectured in Germany, Austria, Canada, things like that.
Now, at some point, I take it you got married?
Yes. Well, still married. Had 4 kids, and my daughter had 4 children also. I have 5. Wait a minute. I have 4 grandchildren, and I got 5 great-grands. So they still come around and mess with me, and I mess with them. But you know, if you stop and think about the things that disturb you, annoy you, see, it can create evil thoughts and stuff like that. I can't allow that. I enjoy life too much. I'm retired since 1986. I retired from Transworld Airline. I wound up a lead mechanic there, and I had 16 guys working under me, 1 black, all the rest were white. And I took this course in Psychology 1, so that it would help me dealing with people, you know, so I'd learn, you know, keep my composure, see. And I had some bigots who were there, and I treated them so damn good that the other guys got on their case, on the biggest case. And today, we're all a big family. I'm out, and, like, when was it? Just today, you know, just before you called, I still go out there to bank at the credit union. And anytime I go, I meet somebody, and I'm sitting down, rapping, and we had such a good time working together.
Tell me a little bit about that crest you're wearing.
Oh, this is our battalion insignia.
Okay, let me zoom in on that.
Yeah. Here's the original up here on the front here, the size of it, see?
Okay, I can't get that, but I can get
Yeah.
And it says, come out fighting.
Come out fighting.
Okay. And I've never seen one like that before.
Yeah.
Was that something you had made special, or?
I made it myself as a copy of this one I'm wearing on my hat. See? I made it large enough so everybody could see it. You can't see this one too good,
You can't
see?
miss that.
And just like when I met President Clinton at the ceremony awarding Reuben Rivers the Congressional Medal of Honor, he couldn't look me in the eye, and I didn't understand why. Till finally, I saw what he's looking at. He was looking at my Black Panther.
Do you want to hold that photo up for us?
Yes. Okay. Hope you see it there.
Hold it right there, and I'll zoom in.
Okay. You're not getting any reflection from the lights out there, are you? Let's see. Let me pull it.
Okay, yes, that's much better.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a nice photo.
Mm-hmm. Well, we were shaking hands, and the president just couldn't seem to look at me straight in the face. I wanted eye contact. So finally I realized he was looking at my Panther. I shielded it with my hand. and looked him in the eye and said, President Clinton, this panther is gentle as a kitten when stroked, but furious as a tiger when provoked. So he laughed, and we shook it off.
Is there anything else you'd like to cover that we may have missed?
Oh, yes, I'd like to state also that Jackie Robinson.
Oh, yes, I want to get a shot of him.
Yeah, I got this taped down, so I can't pick it up.
That's all right, I'm not getting that much glare.
Baseball great Jackie Robinson served with the 761st Black Panther Battalion. He was known as a football player back in those days. This shot that you see of him here with the breeches, he had just transferred from the Army Cavalry to the 761st Black Panther Battalion. I got to know him very well. He was a morale officer, and he was given the job to keep me and my buddies out of trouble, because we were young and we were flipped and we'd
Must have been a tough job, huh?
It was, see. So he was just so nice. Every day we'd meet with him, the three of us. And one of our guys, Leonard Smith, we grew up together here in Jamaica. And my mom's was his Sunday school teacher. I knew him since I was 5. Another guy, William Sidefax, he was a good buddy of ours from Brooklyn. Anyway, Jackie used to take us down to a motor park, and we'd get into the ambulance. They had 4 cots in the ambulance, and we'd lay down there, and we'd talk to one another, you know, lying and talking and all like that, you know. But the idea of this was to keep us from getting in trouble. And behind this segregation and discrimination, I refused the rank. I should have been at least a staff sergeant. But after enduring what I did in the South and all like that, it was beyond me to take it. And I told the officers that I didn't want it. My mom's finally wrote to my company commander, Ivan Harrison, a black officer, and wanted to know why her son couldn't get a rank. He called me and he said, I got a letter from your mother, and she wants you with the rank, so I'm starting you up a rank. He says, you sew on this stripe. I'm starting you off as a PFC. I said, I don't want it. I'm ordering you to sew it on. I didn't want it. It was an order. Anyway, I used base stitches to put it on, stitches maybe 3 stitches to an inch. That night I went up to a post exchange. I went up to a counter and asked a man for a pack of Chesterfield cigarettes. He turned around to get it. When he turned back around, I deliberately let him see me slip my chocolate bar in my pocket. He said, is that all? He says, will that be all? I said, yes, sir. You want to look around? You want to see something else? I said, no, sir, I just want the cigarettes. He rang me up for the cigarettes. I turned, I went out. When I got to the door, they always kept MP there. Click up, grabbed me, arrested. And I lost my stripes. Ivan Harrison, my company commander, we wound up the best of friends. Yeah, in later years, he just shook his head. I went through combat in the commander's position. We only had a 4-man crew, and we were supposed to carry one of the officers along. There were 3 tanks like that in headquarters. So I'm commanding when we didn't have an officer, and that's the way we got along.
Okay, anything else you'd like to add?
I don't know, right? But I went down, let's see. We have had 53 reunions throughout the years. We missed a couple of them, and each year our ranks get lower and lower. I guess we must be about 40 or 45 guys left. And, I lost my nickname they gave me at the time. It used to be Youngblood. Can't say that anymore. All right, so I don't think of anything else here, but this was one unit I was really proud of, very proud of it. These 8 men here got battlefield commissions. Yeah. And one of our guys became state senator of Illinois. And so many of them did so well. So many of them did so well. I can honestly say that I don't know of any of them who went astray or got into any real trouble or anything like that in life. Here I have a picture of this picture up here. This is a British lady and a husband. She's an elderly woman, and she used to come out to a hospital in England every Wednesday, and she would cook tarts with their meager rations and whatnot, and bring me tarts out there. She adopted me as her son. She communicated with my mother and rode with her to Mom's till her death some years later. Here I have another picture of this little kid along with his dad. I met him in London. I was standing at a crossing, waiting to cross the street, when the kid just grabbed my hand. When I looked down, his mother started to apologize. Says, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Says, I can't help it. His dad was killed in the RAF, and he missed male companionship. I spent the rest of the day with the mother and the daughter, that little young child, and this kid. And I got so involved with them, I didn't even get back to camp that night. I had to sleep in a telephone booth in London. I've had a pretty full life. I mean, I've had a full life. My sister was an English teacher, and I've tried several times to do my biography with her, but when I get down to nitty-gritty and start thinking about the things and the suffering, not only of us, but the suffering of some of these poor refugees that march towards our tank. No concern of the danger and war, just walking, getting away from the front. Sometimes stepping on mines as they came towards us. I still have my prayer book that I carried all through combat. I still have that at home.
Well, I guess we're running out of time, so I guess we'll have to end here.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
It's been our pleasure.
Okay. Now,